Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Success Academy. I'm Shashank Dias, and in this video we are going to look at another type of question that you would get in the IELTS writing part 1. We are going to discuss about pie charts. Alright, so if you have watched our previous videos on introduction to writing part 1 or any of the different types of questions that we have discussed with regards to IELTS writing part 1, you would have an idea about the marking structure, you would have an idea about the writing structure, right? If you do have an idea, then what you have to keep in mind is everything you have learned with regards to the marking as well as the writing structure remains exactly the same when it comes to the pie chart. There are only a few vocabulary related differences, but aside from that, everything remains the same. Okay. However, if you have not checked out our previous videos on writing part 1, make sure to go and check them out. We'll put the links in the description below. So make sure to go and check those videos out first before coming and watching this. But nonetheless, if you are maybe too lazy to go through the videos we have done before, let me just give you a very quick recap of the marking structure as well as the writing structure for writing part 1. When you look at the marking structure, when you look at the marking criteria, first you have task achievement. Task achievement relates to the content which you have written. If you have encompassed everything that needs to be included in your answer, if you have mentioned all the key points, if you have compared all the relevant trends, if all the necessary information or the content is present in your answer, this is where you will get marks for task achievement. Next, we have lexical resources. Lexical resources refer to the vocabulary, the quality vocabulary that you use during your answer. Then you have grammatical range and accuracy. Grammatical range and accuracy refers to the correct grammar that you use and also the compound sentence structures that you use during your answer. If you write simple sentence structures, chances are you would end up with a lower band score, whereas if you go for more complex or compound sentences with better conjunctions and better cohesive devices, you will end up with a higher band score. Then we have coherence and cohesion. Coherence is the overall structure of your answer, whereas cohesion is the connectivity between your individual sentences and paragraphs. All right. So that is your marking criteria. That is what you will be given marks for. Then when you look at the writing structure, again, nothing changes here. You have the introduction, you have the overview, and you have the body paragraphs. Alright. Okay, so when we are writing the introduction, even if it is for a pie chart, we follow the same rules as before, which is we paraphrase the question, but before we do that, we go through the different headings that have been given in the question to see if the question itself has missed out on any points. So for example, if you look at the question that you see here, this question says the pie charts below show the comparison of different kinds of energy production of France in 2 years. Alright. The question itself has not mentioned which years have they mentioned. So 1995 and 2005. They have said comparison of energy production, but then they have not given any indication as to what those different types of energy are. So you could include a few of these in the introduction itself. It's not mandatory, but of course it's better if you do, because it's just 4 different sources of energy which they have mentioned. All right. So you can include all of that in your introduction. However, it's not necessary, but you can include it if you want to. So basically what you do is you paraphrase the question. All right. The overview should give you an overall idea of what you see in the 2 graphs. All right. I always use this example to explain it. If you are, let's say, an accountant or a financial manager at a company and you have to give an overview, right? At the end of the year, when you're giving your overview, all you have to say is whether you're profitable or not. That is the overview. You explain in detail how you became profitable or how you were at a loss in your body paragraph. Do you understand what I mean? So in your overview, all you're going to say is, am I profitable or am I not? In your body paragraph, that is where you show the company accounts and you show the different income and expenses and all of that, right? With this type of question, with writing part 1, for all questions, it's the same scenario. You just have to look at the two pie charts and say what is the overall outcome that you can see in these two pie charts, right? So if you look at this question here, what you can say is in both the years 1995 and 2005, gas and coal have been the main contributors to energy. In both the years 1995 and 2005, gas and coal have been the main contributors to energy production. The other sources of energy have not fluctuated as much. That's the overall idea that you can get, right? And you can say overall across the board, energy has not fluctuated by a big margin. All right, there have been only minimal fluctuation throughout. So that is your overview. You don't have to mention any facts, any figures. There doesn't have to be any specific details, just overall, what can you see? So even if you're explaining this to someone else, that is how you should go about doing it. Overall, what is the idea that you can get? All right, when you compare, what is the idea that you can get? All right, so that is how you write any answer for writing part 1. You have your introduction, you have the overview, and then you have the body paragraph. There is no conclusion that needs to be written. So then you must be questioning, okay, when it comes to pie charts, then what is the difference? The main difference is in the vocabulary that you would have to use. Pie charts usually include a lot of percentages. All right, that's a feature of pie charts. They include a lot of percentages. All right, so mainly you need to include vocabulary revolving around these percentages. You need to know synonyms for certain percentages that you are using. All right, aside from that, you also have a few pointers that you can keep in mind. One thing is, always make sure to highlight the largest and smallest proportions in your pie chart, right? Whatever biggest proportion that you see, whatever the smallest that you see, make sure to highlight that because they count as key information. If there is more than one pie chart, make sure to always compare the trends. So you can have two body paragraphs. In the first one, you can just describe each pie chart that you see. This paragraph does not have to be that long. The second, however, which is the longer one, you need to compare the two pie charts that you see. All right. So take a bigger word count for the comparison as opposed to just the description. Make sense? And also make sure to pay attention to the dates, right? Because if you're writing about something in the past, then you need to go with the past tense, which counts for your grammar. If you're writing about something in the present, then you need to use the present tense. However, if you're writing about something in the future, then you need to use the future tense. All right, so you need to pay attention to the different dates, the different years which have been mentioned. All right, finally, you need to pay attention to using as many synonyms as possible to the different percentages that have been given. Now keep in mind, there are certain percentages where it just does not make sense to use synonyms. Now if you again look at this same question that we have been looking at so far, you would see, okay, 29.63%, right? 30.31%, 30.93%. These are percentages which are just too specific for us to try and go to give a synonym, right? I mean, you could say something like, so for example, if it's 30.93, you could say just a bit less than a third, right? Just a bit less than a third. So a third is 33%. But if you take 30.93 and then 30.31, they are both just a bit less than a third. So depending on how specific your percentages are, you have to be practical. You can't just use synonyms for the sake of using it, because then also you will get your marks deducted. But wherever possible, try to use synonyms. Wherever you can't, just don't use synonyms, right? You can just use the percentages as they are. All right, so have a look at this question. We are also going to look at the answer for this question, or a sample answer for this question. All right, okay, so I hope you took a good look at the question. Now let's look at the answer. So first we have the introduction. The provided graphs depict the breakdown of France's energy production across 5 key categories in 1995 and 2005. We haven't mentioned the 5 distinct categories in detail, but we have said, look, there are 5 distinct categories across these 2 years, right? That's all, a very simple introduction. There isn't anything too complicated about that. So any answer that you write, all you do is you just have to paraphrase the question. You just need to ensure that any information that is not included in the question, that is important to the question, you need to include in your introduction as well. Those are mainly the headings, right? The years, the different categories, that's what you should include in your introduction. All right, so this is how you write an introduction. Next, we go on to the overview. So I told you the overview is the overall idea of what has happened across both charts. All right. So overall, gas and coal constituted the majority of France's energy output in both years, while nuclear power and other energy sources played a minor role. Notably, there was minimal fluctuation in energy production over the 10-year period, right? That means across the 10 years, there hasn't been much of an energy fluctuation overall, right? Mainly gas and coal have been the biggest contributors to energy production, all right? Again, a very clear, straightforward overview, all right? Then we go on to the body paragraph. Examining the data, coal production experienced a marginal increase from 29.80% in 1995 to 30.90% in 2005, representing a modest uptick of approximately 1%. Similarly, gas production saw a slight rise from 29.63% to 30.10% during the same time frame. Now you see, I haven't used any synonyms whatsoever for the percentages because it's just impractical, right? It's just impractical because you can say things like just less than a third or just more than 2/5 or just more than 1/4, but it just doesn't make sense, right? In this context, because the percentages are so specific, it just does not make sense to use synonyms. However, we have used synonyms for the directions, all right? So we have said a marginal increase, a slight rise, a modest uptick, right? Those words have not been the same, right? We have managed to use synonyms in those instances to try and go for a better band score. All right, so if we move on to the second paragraph, we can see, meanwhile, other energy sources, including nuclear power, collectively contributed 11.30% to total energy production in 1995, but made a notable increase of around 8% to 19.20% in 2005. In contrast, the production of petrol experienced a decline from 29.27% in 1995 to 19.55% in 2005, representing a substantial decrease of nearly 10%. Alright, so again you can see we have tried to compare the two pie charts as much as possible. We have tried to use different synonyms and cohesive devices like meanwhile, in contrast to, a notable increase, collectively contributed, but we have kept the percentage points the same, and since we can't use many synonyms, we have mentioned the changes as much as possible, right? Speaking of good vocabulary, make sure to contact us on the number below if you want to get your hands on our video course or join our 10-day classes. With both of these, you get an information bank free of charge, which includes all the information that you need to know before you go and sit for the IELTS exam. You also get access to 50+ mock papers and all the information that you need. It's basically a comprehensive study pack, both in terms of written and video-based information to make it easier for you to get the highest band score for your exam. So make sure to call us today to get your hands on these material. All right. With that being said, let's look at the final paragraph, or the third one. Notably, the most significant variation is observed in petrol production, which experienced a considerable decline of 10% over the past decade. On the flip side, nuclear power and other energy sources collectively demonstrated a substantial increase of approximately 8%. Conversely, gas and coal production exhibited minimal fluctuation, with both experiencing a marginal rise of approximately 1% each. So we are paying attention to the largest and the least fluctuations that have occurred. So I said you always have to mention what is the biggest, what is the smallest change in the pie charts when you're comparing, right? So that's what we have done in the final paragraph after we have explained all the comparisons that we possibly can in the first two paragraphs. All right, so that is how you write an answer for a pie chart based question. All right, so aside from that, I also told you that when you get percentage points, you have to try and use synonyms as much as possible. I told you to be practical about it, right? So here are some percentages for which you can use synonyms when you're writing answers for the test. All right, okay, so if you take 5%, you can say 1/20th, right? Or 1 out of 20, right? 1 out of 20, 1/20th, 5 out of 100, any of these you can say, right? If you get 10%, you can say 10 out of 100 or 1/10th, right? 20, 30, 40, 50, all of these up to 100, you can use the same form of synonym. You can say 10 out of 100 or 1/10th. You can say 20 out of 100 or 2/10ths. You can say 30 out of 100 or 3/10ths. The same structure you can follow for multiples of 10, 10, 20, 30, 40 up to 100. All right. So for example, if you take 80%, you can say 80 out of 100, or you can say 8/10ths. That is one way of mentioning those synonyms. But if you take 20% again, you can say 1/5, right? 1/5. So for example, 40% would be 2/5, right? 60% would be 3/5, right? And 80% would be 4/5, right? So fifth means you have divided 100 into 5 parts. In that case, 20 means 1 out of 5, which means 1/5, right? With that same strategy in mind, if you say 25%, you can say 1/4. 50% would be 2/4, or you can say half for 50%. 75% can be 3/4, right? 3/4, okay? 33% can be 1/3. 66% can be 2/3, right? And of course, 99% would be a full. And of course, for any other percentage that you get aside from this, right, you can mention it to the closest percentage synonym that you can find. What do I mean by that? Now, for example, 49%, there isn't a particular synonym for that, right? But you know, for 50%, you can say a half. So 49% would be just less than a half, right? Or 1% less than a half. Do you understand what I mean? So 47% might be 3% less than a half. Or again, you can say just a bit below a half. Makes sense? So if you, let's say, take 77%, you can say just a bit more, or just more than 3/4, right? Just more than 3/4. Or you can say for 77%, you can say 2% more than 3/4, right? Any of these synonyms you can mention. So let's say 22%, right? That's 2% more than 1/5, right? Or if it's 24%, you can say 1% less than 1/4, or just less than 1/4. If, for example, you say 18%, you can say close to 1/5, right? Or close to 20%. Any of these synonyms you can mention. So you have the main synonyms at hand, right? That's the multiples of tens. Anything that you can divide into, right? The clear divisions you have synonyms for. But then the numbers that you can't really divide 100 by, you can round them off and mention them to the closest percentage point that you can. All right. So that is how you use synonyms for the different percentages. All right? Okay, so with that being said, we are at a close to today's video. I hope you got an understanding of how to write an answer to a pie chart based question. We will be discussing more writing task 1 answers, and we will be discussing the other types of questions that we haven't so far in the future. So make sure to subscribe to our channel, share this with a friend if this was valuable to you. Make sure to comment any questions that you may have, any feedback that you may have down in the comments below, and make sure to click that notification bell so that you would be notified every time we publish a new video. We publish videos every Sunday related to the IELTS exam. We also publish during the week on Wednesday with videos related to English grammar. And also, if you would like to enroll in our 10-day IELTS program or purchase our video course or our study pack, make sure to contact us on the number below. Right. So till our next video, keep practicing.